From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
The consequences of indefinite detention cannot be understated. They can cause severe and lasting physical and psychological damage that rise to the level of torture. At Guantanamo, the overriding hopelessness is presenting a health crisis that must be addressed before Guantanamo becomes, in the words of Adnan Latif, and I quote you, a piece of hell that kills everything.
Over 100 men at Guantanamo have reportedly entered their fifth week of a hunger strike against deteriorating conditions. This comes as the Obama administration goes before the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights defending its treatment of prisoners held at Guantanamo. A number of prisoners have been held without charge for over 11 years. More than half have been cleared for release. Then the fight against Citizens United.
On the day of the Citizens United ruling, we at freespeechforpeople.org and others called for this amendment to overrule Citizens United and to make clear that people, not corporations, shall govern in America.
We'll host a debate between two critics of Citizens United on how best to challenge the landmark ruling that opened the floodgates of corporate money in elections. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodmore. More than 100 detainees held in the U.S. military prison at Guantanamo are reportedly entering their fifth week of a hunger strike, sparked by deteriorating conditions. News of the hunger strike first emerged last week, but it appears the action involves far more prisoners than previously thought. The unrest comes as U.S. military officials have confirmed a guard fired rubber bullets at detainees in January for the first time in prison's history. We'll have more on Guantanamo after headlines. Afghan President Hamid Karzai says his government plans to take full control of the Bagram prison from the U.S. by next week. The U.S. military has stalled the transfer amidst disputes over Karzai's vow to hold trials and release innocent prisoners. Speaking at a gathering of tribal elders in Helmand province, Karzai urged public support for a standoff with the United States.
I am sure you are all aware of the arguments about the Bagram prison handover. I urge you all to stand with me and say that Karzai is right, and we want to take responsibility of the prison, and those who are innocent should be released. God willing, this demand will be implemented practically by Saturday or Sunday next week.
The CIA is reportedly increasing its operations inside Iraq. According to the Wall Street Journal, CIA operatives are replacing U.S. military forces and working with Iraq's counterterrorism service. The purported aim is to help fight al-Qaeda in Iraq and prevent a spillover from Syria's internal conflict. The CIA's role in the Middle East appears to be expanding overall. The agency is operating a drone base in Saudi Arabia and training Syrian rebels in Jordan. A new report is warning Syria's children are perhaps the greatest victims of their country's civil war. The group Save the Children says more than 2 million Syrian children are facing disease, malnutrition, severe trauma, and early marriage from 2 years of unrelenting conflict. Studies of Syrian children in refugee camps found high incidences of physical abuse and of experiencing the death of a family member. At the United Nations, Patrick McCormick of the children's agency UNICEF warned a generation of Syrian youth are at risk.
Millions of children inside Syria and across the region are witnessing their past and their future disappear amidst the rubble and destruction of this prolonged conflict. We must rescue them from the brink for their sake and for the sake of Syria and future generations.
According to Save the Children, increasing numbers of children are being recruited by armed groups on both sides. Child recruits have been used as porters, guards, informers, fighters, and even human shields. A top United Nations investigator is accusing Iran of a systemic and systematic crackdown on human rights. In a report to the UN Human Rights Council, UN Rapporteur Ahmad Shahid said Iran has employed torture and other abuses in order to stifle dissent.
A majority of human rights defenders, including those that defend the rights of women, religious and ethnic minorities, as well as those that work to advance protections for the environment, workers and children, continue to be subjected to harassment, arrest, interrogation and torture, and are frequently charged with vaguely defined national security crimes, which is seemingly meant to erode the front line of human rights defense in the country. My current report also presents what appears to be unimpeachable forensic evidence that torture is occurring in Iran on a geographically widespread and systemic basis.
Shadid says Iran spared the lives of at least a dozen people after their plight drew international attention, suggesting the Iranian government is responsive to global pressure. Iran has dismissed the report as, quote, a compilation of unfounded allegations initiated by the United States and its European allies. Israeli forces have killed another Palestinian in the occupied West Bank. 25-year-old Mahmoud Titi was among a group of people fired on by Israeli forces during a raid near the city of Hebron. A witness said the soldiers opened fire after being hit by rocks.
Suddenly, the soldiers raided the refugee camp in 3 vehicles, and you know how it will be in the camp. So the youth started to throw stones, and the soldiers opened fire randomly. They fired tear gas grenades, and fired at the houses, and at everything that was moving in the camp.
The Palestinian Authority says Titi was the 6th Palestinian killed by the Israeli occupation force in the West Bank this year. 8 other Palestinians were wounded in the attack. President Obama is due to visit the region a week from today. Tensions between the United States and Venezuelan governments are flaring 1 week after the death of Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez. The Obama administration's expelled 2 Venezuelan diplomats in apparent retaliation for Venezuela's expulsion of 2 U.S. military attachés last week. The attachés were accused of planning to destabilize Venezuela. On Tuesday, Venezuelan Foreign Minister Elias Jawa renewed the claim accusing the U.S. of plotting to topple Chavez before his death. Argentina's last dictator, Arnaldo Bignone, has been given a new life sentence over the kidnappings and disappearances of political opponents and the deliberate theft of babies from political prisoners. Bignone and 2 other defendants were convicted Tuesday for crimes at the Campo de Mayo, a military base used by the dictatorship during its rule from 1976 to 1983. The 3 are already serving jail sentences for other abuses under their military regime. He is currently being tried in another case focusing on Operation Condor, a coordinated effort by Latin American military rulers to target their political opponents in the 70s and 80s. The nation's top intelligence officials are warning cyber attacks from abroad now pose a greater threat to national security than al-Qaeda and other militant groups. For the first time ever, an annual review of threats to the United States lists the risk of foreign computer attacks on the networks of U.S. infrastructure and institutions higher than terrorism, organized crime, and weapons of mass destruction. Director of National Intelligence James Clapper discussed the finding in testimony before the Senate Intelligence Committee.
When it comes to distinct threat areas, our statement this year leads with cyber, and it's hard to overemphasize its significance. Increasingly, state and non-state actors are gaining and using cyber expertise. They apply cyber techniques and capabilities to achieve strategic objectives by gathering sensitive information from public and private sector entities, controlling the content and flow of information, and challenging perceived adversaries in cyberspace. These capabilities put all sectors of our country at risk.
In response, the Pentagon's new Cyber Command has unveiled plans to create 13 offensive teams to counter computer attacks from overseas by the fall of 2015. The teams would be used for cyber operations against foreign countries linked to computer attacks on the United States. The Senate Judiciary has advanced 2 new gun violence measures to the Senate floor. The measures would expand background checks to private gun sales and create a task force on improving safety at schools. A vote on the most contentious gun control measure among Washington lawmakers, banning assault weapons, was postponed. A 6-month-old baby girl shot in a drive-by attack in Chicago has died of her wounds. Janila Watkins and her father were shot on Monday afternoon while he was changing her diaper in a parked minivan. The baby underwent surgery overnight but died Tuesday morning. Her father remains hospitalized in critical condition. A spokesperson for the family, Reverend Corey Brooks, said, quote, "The city of Chicago should be outraged that in our city, a 6-month-old baby could be shot and killed." A witness to the police shooting of an African-American teenager in Brooklyn, New York, is challenging the New York City Police Department's claim he was armed. 16-year-old Kimani Gray was walking down a street in the neighborhood of East Flatbush when two plainclothes officers followed him in an unmarked car. The officers got out to approach Gray and opened fire when they claimed they saw him reach for a gun in his waistband. But speaking to the New York Daily News, a Brooklyn woman who watched the shooting from her window said Gray never had a gun in his hand. Police say they recovered a gun next to Gray's body. On Wednesday night, supporters held a protest in Brooklyn for the second consecutive night to denounce Gray's killing. Community organizer Fatima Shakur was among the speakers to address the crowd.
Kimani Gray was only 16 years old. Parents should not bury their children. Police brutality is not decreasing, it's increasing. So I need to hear your power is in your voice. We don't gotta bash nobody's stores or nothing like that. We more better than that. But your voice is your weapon. Kimani Gray doesn't have no voice no more. We have to be his voice.
Tuesday's protest was peaceful after several stores were vandalized following a rally the day before. New York City Council member and community activist Charles Barron said the killing of Kimani Gray has triggered anger over the marginalization of African Americans.
People are angry and frustrated. We're living in poverty. We're living in unemployment. In the richest country in the history of the planet Earth, we have poverty that equals Egypt's poverty that caused the revolution. And then to have these police officers using deadly force to take the lives of our children, our youth out here, it's just unacceptable. So this is the least that the community could do, is to respond and resist. We always got to resist. We always got to provide vehicles that allow for the ventilation of our anger. And we must resist until we can figure out a strategy for victory.
Colorado is set to legalize same-sex civil unions following final approval by the State House. Democratic Governor John Hickenlooper has vowed to sign the measure into law. It would take effect on May 1st. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Nermeen Sheikh. Welcome to our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world.
Thanks so much for watching this report from Democracy Now!, your daily independent global news hour. We don't accept advertising or corporate funding, but rather rely on donations from viewers like you. Please make your contribution by visiting democracynow.org. We need your support today to keep bringing you this hard-hitting, in-depth reporting.